Okay. Do we have, call this to order, and do we have any amendments to the,
I think there's one on there.
a show cause hearing daily, 315 Central Ave?
Yeah. I make a motion to accept the agenda with the amendment of the show cause put on.
And then also, maybe at some point in the evening, we'll have a few minutes to discuss how the commission feels about certain filings, like whether things should be an NOI or an IDA or whatever. Just with Patrick starting, maybe we could share our thoughts on that with him and vice versa.
Yeah.
All right? That seemed like if we have enough time to do that. Everything else is in place, so.
I make that motion.
I second it.
Hey, all in favor?
Aye.
Great. So maybe just before we get rolling, I'd take a minute. I don't know whether everybody's had a chance to meet Patrick, stop in, say hi. You guys have, but how'd your first week go?
Good, busy.
I bet.
Bringing me up to speed. Penny's been in a bunch of times, too.
She
It's just getting started.
was loaded. She was ready to go. She wanted, we knew she wouldn't give you much slack. Everybody's been waiting. We've been telling people for 3 months, we'll have an agent any day. So, welcome.
Thanks.
Appreciate you being here. Maybe we'll just start in. Usually, what we do is we can do our IDAs at any time, and then we have scheduled times for the hearings. And if we haven't hit that time, then we'll pop into a couple of regular business, go back and forth that, or if something gets continued and we have a little spot, that's typically how we roll through that.
Okay.
So Blake at 147 Captain Pierce Edition, is anybody here? Come on up and,
I have to recuse myself.
oh, that's the one that we couldn't
Yeah, we
vote
couldn't
on.
do because we didn't have a quorum.
Okay. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. So just for the record, you should state your name and,
Kate Blake.
okay, Kate. And you want to put on an addition? Just, do you have a copy of that? So it's barely touching,
Just going into the 100 a little bit.
okay.
Very close.
You want to lead off?
I just don't, it's already disturbed. I can't think of any impact, I don't, other than if there's a, so far away. Erosion controls maybe? That's the
Is there a
only-
patio going into this, like a little cross-hatched area?
No,
Okay. Richard?
No, I thought, of course, I left my copy at home, but I thought it was fine. I didn't see anything enough to worry about.
Pat, did you have a chance to take a look at that?
Yeah, I was out there today. Just the only question I had was there a determination of that stream of being intermittent or perennial out the back? I don't know if it's a... I mean, it may not impact the project because it's, it's in a lawn area right up against the house. But it would be something you may want to put on to the RDA as a resource area.
Okay.
Did you have any guess of how far into the resource area it was?
It would probably be about 180 feet from the stream to where the edge of the structure would be. And, I mean, the wetlands seem to be 100. You'd be outside the 100 for work. But
Where did that wetlands line, who marked the wetlands for you, do you know? Or how did it get on this plan?
it was in a septic as-built
Okay.
that I got
Oh,
from
all
the
right.
engineer.
Okay, I know where this, sorry. Now I got it. Okay. So I have anybody want to make a motion? Or negative? 3?
The area described in the request is not subject to protection. No, it is. -2.
Still gotta get those straightened out.
I think it should be negative
Okay.
Because it's not gonna remove, fill, or dredge or alter that.
Right.
And so I
So
make
a -2?
Yeah, make a motion for a -2.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll probably look for a little bit of, I don't even know that silt fence is really, it's so far away and there's a lawn here.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to
And
do is
there's a
see any,
wall.
the material that they excavate from the site, keep it away from the wetlands.
Okay.
If they have to stockpile anything, if there's a chance that anything's gonna, any siltation would run towards the wetlands, you want to try to encapsulate that with some hay bales or
Okay.
silt fence. But I think who's ever doing the work should just make sure that they don't do any work any closer to the wetlands than they have to get this done.
Okay.
And,
Oh, see, because this is the driveway right
Yeah.
here. So they're already coming in to the
Right.
50. It's already all.
right. But if they don't
That's just the
do any
100
more
actually.
work, then right in here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay?
Yep.
Right.
Does that mean we shouldn't put any of the fill from, that's excavated anywhere nearer the wetlands?
That would be ideal,
Okay.
or minimize it. But, obviously, we don't want you stockpiling it closer to the 50 or moving more material closer to the 50-foot wetlands.
Okay.
All right? And somehow I have a feeling that someone will be keeping an eye on that.
I have a feeling for that too. Bird's eye view.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Good, you're
So
good.
do I get paperwork, or how does that work? with
Yeah,
my
why don't you
building permit?
come back into the office, or we'll send it, or just you can pick it up?
Want to pick it up, that'll be fine.
Okay, all right.
Buy it.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we go to the next one. Sharon, 305 Country Way, wetlands delineation continued. Fire away.
Good evening. For the record, Greg Morse, registered engineer, Morse Engineering. This is a continuation of the ANRAD filing at 305 Country Way. Since the last meeting, we've gone out, we've done a site walk with the commission. Your consultant, Steve Ivis, has gone out, and Steve has prepared his report and submitted it to you. We submitted a set of revised plans dated January 15th. Those plans basically reflect the wetland flags that Steve reviewed in the field with his locations, shown in blue, marking the bordering vegetated wetland, and then the IB series flags, which delineate the bank of an intermittent stream through the site. There was also some clarification regarding a DEP Zone A. We've shown that, as shown in orange on this plan, per the Mass GIS designations. So I believe this is a plan that, is endorsed by your consultant as far as the wetland flag locations. They've been reviewed with respect to vegetation as well as hydrology and soils. These are the flags that you saw out in the field. I'll turn it over to you if there are any questions.
Penny?
No, I don't think I have any more questions because all the lines are on there, and it is just a wetlands delineation at this time, nothing else.
I'm satisfied as well.
I'm fine with it.
Pat, do you want to?
I just had a question. The flags were revised in the field, and those are on this revised plan? Okay.
Yes.
And soils were done on those too?
Yeah, soils were done, and we submitted as part of the original ANRAD, we submitted DVW data sheets, and then as part of Steve's report, he documented the conditions of the flags as well.
Steve Ivis was the commission's consultant for that, so do you have anything to add to this, Steve?
Nothing more, no, I've seen the plan, and it looks exactly like what we saw in the field.
And you were satisfied with the adjustments that you made with the wetlands line?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. Anybody in the audience? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Lenore White. I'm a professional wetland scientist with Wetland Strategies, and I represent Mr. Cursell in this matter, who's in a butter. Excuse me. I haven't had a chance to look at the plan yet, but we did have some concerns about it when we conducted a site walk with you folks. And I appreciate the fact that you and the applicant actually let us on the property. Our review was somewhat limited, however, because we were there just for informational purposes and we couldn't do a lot of discussion. But since that time, I've written a letter which I've submitted to you folks and outlined my concerns about some of the issues. And I can go over them briefly. And one was the bordering vegetated wetland in this area here, A10 area. Mr. Holmes was kind enough to do one augering hole there, and although you can't tell hydric soils from just one auger hole, there were some conditions there that seemed to me that would indicate hydric conditions. The second indicator of wetland hydrology is the vegetation. And in most of this area here, there was quite a bit of hydric vegetation, and I think it was you, Todd, that even said, gee, I thought I had asked them to move this flag up in this location there.
Which they did.
Which they did, this one flag here, but this whole area here was essentially that same type of vegetation, and the soils, in my estimation, as a certified soil evaluator, did show evidence of hydrology. Soils are pretty tough to do. There's a difference between the way the state looks at it and the way the feds look at it. And the state is a little less extreme, and under the state guidelines, I would say that there was some hydric soil in this area, in addition to the plants. So I have some concerns about the delineation. And this area had been delineated before. There was a subdivision that was proposed way back when, and when that subdivision was proposed, this whole area was determined to be wet. And it's identified as a hydric soil. The Soil Conservation Service has identified this as a Brockton soil. Brockton soil is a known hydric soil in this area. So I think when we put all those factors together, there's some real doubt about the accuracy of that wetland line in this area. The second concern I had was there is this stream that goes up here and it exits out of a culvert. Now, we weren't able to look at that culvert the day of the site inspection because we weren't allowed on that property. But back in November of 2012, that area was determined to be a bordering vegetated wetland, which means that this stream is in fact jurisdictional. Now, I know that Brad Holmes had gone out and said, gee, no, I don't think it is, but you still have a determination, a valid order of conditions that was issued in November of 2012, which looked at that area and which identified that as a bordering vegetated wetland. And even in your consultant's report, when he looked at it, he said, well, it's confined to the outfall pipe, but the outfall pipe has about 50% wetland vegetation, and there are hydric soils there. So all evidence points to the fact that this area adjacent at the outfall is in fact a bordering vegetated wetland, which means that the stream channel is jurisdictional under the Wetlands Protection Act. I understand that the Zone A has been changed, and that is something that we had talked a lot about, as you recall, during the site visit, and I'm happy to see that it's now shown on this plan as it's depicted in Mass GIS. But I just wanted to raise those concerns about the delineation of the bordering vegetated wetland.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I specifically looked at that area that was Brockton soils done by the Soil Conservation Service. And in 4 cases in Norwell, 1 case in Norwell, 2 cases in Hanover, that Pat and I have just worked on actually just 2 weeks ago, and 1 case here in Scituate, I have found wetland vegetation, particularly at the shrub layer, which has been northern spicebush with non-hydric soils below. They're all sandy and gravelly type soils at the surface. They're all on slopes. And my theory is, for all of these 4 locations, what's happening is there's water coming down the slope on the surface in the springtime, but not during the growing season when the hydric soils would be built up. Anaerobic conditions would exist if water was in the soil during the growing season. So Brad and I together, as well as myself alone, made multiple soil tests all the way up the line from about flag A10 let me see, to the north and east, and never found any hydric soils in that area. Number two, regarding the outfall, I would say that the few common elder plants that are there are living on the bank of the outfall, and the only place we found hydric soils was directly in front of the outfall. There were no hydric soils in any other location there, so that's just some other information to give you.
Who flagged that wetlands? I recall the hearing, but who flagged the wetlands around that outfall pipe in 12?
Originally, it was Brad.
Yeah, I can address those points, and starting with that. On that lot to the...
The Bunga Zone lot.
Yeah, right, to the northeast or so.
Mm-hmm.
There was a previous plan for a septic project, I believe, on a budding lot that had come onto this lot and delineated the majority of the lot as being wetlands. My concentration at that time was to go take a look at the lot and see if it was wetlands or not. Getting inside the lot, it was clearly not wetlands, it was upland vegetation and upland plants. And the closest point that I could find was the outfall. I didn't have the opportunity to get off-site and travel down the stream as I did on this lot, because obviously I'd be on a number of different properties without access. So at that point, the closest thing that I could find that would resemble a wetland was that outfall. My concentration on that lot was to show that the lot wasn't wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
So it was all geared towards documenting upland conditions, and the closest area was that outfall, which, you know, led off
Right,
site.
there was like a half a dozen flags around that.
Just circled the edge. And again, if you were to stand in the middle of that edge, if you had 6 or 7 elderberry bushes, like Steve said, but you looked at the general areas yourself, it wouldn't be dominant wetland vegetation. To get into the lower portion of the lot, as far as the wetland delineation, you'll see in the wetland report as part of the ANRAD that there are DEP data sheets. There's 2 plots, analysis plots, within the region of A7 and A8, very close to that area that Lenore White discussed. There's documentation of soils hydrology and all the conditions pertaining to wetland delineation. It is documented as being upland soils. Steve and I looked at that very closely, and if you look at Steve's report, he actually documented each wetland flag and talked about the conditions at each, and it is as accurate as a wetland delineation as you'll find, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
There's one other fact that I wanted to let the commission know as well. In 1987, the line was higher on the hillside, absolutely. That was because the state had wetlands only as vegetation. In 1996, that changed to soils and hydrology. That's why that particular line has come down gradient.
Okay. Does anybody else remember the November 12th hearing on the lot that's above that? There was a,
The Williamsburg one?
yes,
Just vaguely.
if you went out there. I mean, there's an easement that's on that piece of property, and there's a 36-inch reinforced concrete pipe that deals with street drainage, and it's ended, and there was a few lines that were around the end of that. So was, Lenore's asking, there were some wetlands lines that were up there, and then now they seem to stop before it, and Brad's explanation is that he wasn't on. I don't know if you recall or not, but it was on 3A, there was some errant wetlands lines. We had like a couple of hearings, and somebody found some lines that were just sort of very vague, and that's the problem when you have something that's on someone else's property.
Oh, I remember that.
You know, that they're not flagging their specific site, and it's kind of makes it difficult for us, because we could hold a hearing and people can't move on to another piece of property where there might be a larger wetlands. The other hard part is the soils, and after going to several contentious hearings and seeing several experts dig up soils, and one is pointing to one color and one to another, and I realize it's a science, it's not an exact piece. I'm not the best person for color, but it can get difficult as to exactly what's there. But what I have seen over the years that I've been serving here, when there's multiple wetland scientists doing this, and we've done 2 or 3 where there's been up to 3 or 4 scientists marking a line, the line's as wide as that table apart, and that's about the biggest change that I've ever seen. You know, literally, people's lines are running parallel, and it's the difference of 6 or 7 feet. I've never, very seldom seen something where the width of this wrong. They usually run relatively close, so. Lenore?
Just to counter some of these arguments,
I'm just trying to explain some different things, pro or con. I want everybody to understand.
I think you're spot on, and soils are very difficult. As a certified soil evaluator, I can tell you that I've had many cases where it's been challenged, and the colors are very closely related. When I looked at Brad's report, he didn't have the actual locations of where those test pits were taken, so I had no idea where they were taken. But when I looked at some of the soil data, in one instance he has 8 inches of a dark brown soil. Now, 6 to 8 inches of a dark brown soil at the top is a hydric soil indicator here in Massachusetts. And depending upon the light, depending upon if that soil is moist, you might be able to say 3 different people would pick out 3 different colors on that Munsell chart. But given the location, given the soils, given the vegetation, in my mind, they are hydric indicators. And regarding the sort of the culvert there, I'm not a lawyer, but if you have a valid permit that says it's a wetland, I don't know what you can do to change that now. I mean, because if that were the case, anybody could say, oh, well, gee, we missed our appeal period. We're gonna come in and change that, and you folks would have to look at it all over again. So I think the fact that you called it a wetland, and it was Brad Holmes that did it, belies, you know, some truth to the fact that indeed it's a wetland, and you folks had identified it as a wetland back in November of, you know, less than 3 months ago.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience?
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can add one point, maybe the correct thing to do now is, now that we know the science further down and how the whole system works, which you didn't have that opportunity regarding the northerly lot, probably the correct thing would be to come in and possibly amend the order of conditions, or, you know, get a revision to the commission so that we can correct it. But that's not what we're talking about here, and I think we've blocked it. We stood in the stream, we could see that this is, or the swale, we could see that this only is a function of street water drainage. Steve, Ivis, and I reviewed the whole area to make sure that there wasn't an upgradient wetland source that would get into the storm system and then down through, and that's not the case. It's all street water collection. And regarding the wetland delineation, it's very difficult for someone to walk on the site, whether they're an expert or else, and be able to come up with a conclusion. I spent 2 days in the field delineating this, and Steve and I spent a full day walking each flag, discussing it, looking at it, getting a feel for how the site works, and examining soils up and below the line. There were some changes to the flags. They've been incorporated on the plan.
Todd, you walked the site with, is it Bruce Bach?
Bruce, yeah.
And I know that he's marking it for tributary, which is different than this. And when, actually, I'm still unclear who has jurisdiction over what, but I'm just glad that you have this line on here. When he walked up that piece, I mean, there's clearly an intermittent stream that turns into a boulder field, I guess. Did he make any remark or anything about how far he thought that wetlands continued, or did he really discuss that very much?
Like up gradient from the reservoir? Did he?
Yes.
No. He was primarily focused on the flow of the water to the reservoir.
Okay.
And he made the comment that it was the flow of the water is more important than whether or not it's actually in a channel or above ground or below ground, because I found spots where it was actually, it was apparent to me that it was flowing underground because it was under big roots of trees, like you could see it there, but it was below ground, so you're like, but it's kind of flowing underneath these big tree stumps. And he mentioned at the time it didn't matter, that it was the flow, not the characteristics of how it got there.
Okay.
In terms, I do have one question for our new agent, actually. In terms of, we did approve that plan for the Williamsburg property, and when I first started looking at this, I was like, oh, well, it's a stream, it's not a drainage ditch, because we approved that plan, it has a wetland up above it. So if there's an upgradient resource, it then is a stream, whereas if it's doesn't drain anything upgradient, it's not a stream. Where we approved that plan, do we have to, like, are we liable in any way? Because we approved that plan saying it's a wetland, and now we're saying on this lot, no, it's not draining a resource. Are we,
Right, I think, as Lenore said, this may be something that a lawyer would be better versed at, but I think, you know, if you made the determination with the knowledge of the best information you had available to you at the time, and then now as more research is done on this site, that may add to what you would have delineated before, so. I mean, it's the street drainage, and when it becomes a stream and all that's, you know, that's inexact too, so.
you can tell that it's not a wetland at the head wall. I mean, at least, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but it doesn't look like it. Seems like sand and gravel that got put there from the road, and that's about it.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Lisa Bertola, and I'm just here to voice a general comment on behalf of the community. I'm
Your
president
address is?
52 Elm Street.
Okay.
And, you know, I do a lot of work in the town just to, on sustainability in general. And I just, at the community, there's a lot of people concerned that we do have a water supply issue, and this does seem to feed into the reservoir. So to the extent we're adding homes, growth is great, and, you know, building the town smart is great, but there is a water supply issue, and there's clearly, I've walked this property many times, there's clearly plenty of water feeding the reservoir from this tributary. So to that extent, I would just urge the decision makers to be smart and protect the resources of it.
You realize that there's a 200-foot buffer from
Yes.
that tributary, so.
I do.
Can you see the map? Do you wanna take-
I've looked at some of the maps. I'm not
Why don't you
sure
just take a
specifically.
quick look at this one?
It's the line shown in orange. is
Yeah, that might be good, so everybody else can.
Setback tributaries to
Right.
the site.
I reckon, and where is the pipe that comes out into the reservoir? Does it, I mean, the water just
Way-
seems to flow
way
generally.
The plan to the north.
No, but there's a pipe down at the reservoir that seems to.
Oh, yeah,
collect
the
some of that.
reservoir is significantly below this plan.
Right.
Oh, dear.
I just think any interruption of the flow of the water, I would think would be concerning. You know, I'm saying maybe position properties so that they're not interrupting the water flow. That's my general concern. And I'm sure you're all keeping that in mind. I'm not the scientist, but in terms of the number of properties being proposed and their position.
So for right now, though, what we're having a hearing on is basically what we call an ANRAD. And so what we have to first determine, the applicant has come to us and said, we'd like to define where the wetland line is. And that's what we're trying to decide tonight, is where the wetlands line are. And then, once that's established, then there's buffer zones from that wetlands line. So then the applicant has to come back again with a notice of intent. At that time, I mean, we don't really know what he's gonna do here.
Okay.
And I appreciate your concern. The biggest piece in terms of protecting the reservoir is this tributary and the buffer zone from that. And it's unclear to me exactly, but it doesn't appear as though the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction on that. That would be a zoning piece or the planning board, but it's not, it seems crazy, but it's not ours. But we want to make sure all the resource areas are on the plan, and then we want to determine where the wetlands line is and then where the buffer zones are from that. And then, once the applicant comes back with any sort of plan to alter the site, then we would look at that and see whether or not it could be made more ecologically protect the sound or whatever. But at this point, what we're trying to determine is this line, okay? And we've hired a consultant to review the line that the applicant did, and try to make sure that the line is correct, and that the resource areas are correct. And then we've also had the opportunity to look at this with someone from DEP who's laying out the tributary, and that's on a plan, and that's the piece that really protects the water that flows to the reservoir. The pipe that we're discussing is an outfall pipe that's really up near Country Way that takes the discharge from all the street drains and some low areas on the other side of Country Way, and it expels it right almost at the property line. It's kind of, unfortunately, it's like you've got three properties sort of converging right on that corner. And when they flag these wetlands, you can only flag the wetland on the property that you're working on unless you have permission from the abutter. So that's what we're trying to determine. Your point is well taken, and
I
as
understand, my concern is that these things take time, you know, to get all the approvals that goes from conservation and then planning, and I've been through these meetings on other issues, and the ricocheting of issues sometimes holds time up, and people get frustrated, the person who wants to do something on the property gets frustrated, and then it's sort of, I just hope it doesn't make some hasty decisions to get things finally moving. And already, just the fact that the tributary was under just discussion, I thought that it had been designated as a tributary a long time ago, and now we had to reassess that. Why was that?
it was brought to our attention, to be quite honest with you, we don't have jurisdiction over that, but it was brought to us by some former Water Resources members that wanted to clarify that, and the DEP was good enough to have someone come out and actually inform us of how that worked. So, I mean, I felt it was very beneficial to our whole commission
Definitely.
to see that.
Yeah, I agree.
And just so you're aware, we don't have the authority to change that. That tributary is on a plan that's set by the state. If the applicant or somebody else wants to say, well, we disagree with that, that's their issue. It's on a plan, it's established, and they've shown the buffer from that in that orange line, which is pretty substantial.
Right. Well, I appreciate everyone's input, and I'm glad to be educated on the process.
Sure.
I felt like a voice from the community was important, and some people can't be at all these meetings. It's very diligent to have to state your case at every meeting, and as a community, there's no agenda, no one's being compensated to provide an argument. It's just, we are in Scituate, I think there's a general feel that we want to do the right thing based on the growth and the need for there's a limited resource here of the reservoir. And we hear about Al Banger saying there's a water shortage every summer, and we have to be prudent to
Well, we certainly want to protect the water that's going in there,
Yeah.
and then at the same time, protect any of the recharge areas.
yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do, and that's why we established the wetlands line and then the buffer zones from that. But, you know, the applicant has certain rights as well
Absolutely.
to do the work on their property once we establish where all those pieces are. And the tributary is well protected. But you want to keep an eye open, because at some point, the applicant may come back with a notice of intent that they want to do some work in the buffer zone.
Right.
And at that point, we'd be having a hearing on that.
Right, I'll keep apprised of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a question. Is the Topper Bank flagged for the intermittent streams on this, or is it only BVW that's?
Yes, the Choppa Bank is flagged for both intermittent stream breaches from here down,
Okay.
from here up, and then the BVW
Okay.
line as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Motion,
I make a motion to close.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Well, that's been enlightening.
Yes, very much so.
Perkins, 309 Central Ave, they're going to continue that?
Part of the delineation.
How much time did they need?
309.
Is it 309 Central?
Yeah. I'm out a month. What's up there?
Thing we finished our work, they're like sticking up, frozen in a cover.
Yeah.
About septic.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, really?
Where we should ask for that.
I know.
Put it out till March or something, I guess. What do you think, Carol? March?
Okay, I make a motion to continue Perkins, 309 Central Ave, to March 4th at 6. Is this a typo? Because it was on for 6. Aren't they supposed to be?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
All right, so 6:20.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. McSherry Brothers, lots 1 and 2, 218 First Parish Road, new build. We did, but it got continued.
Thank you. You know me, Lenore White, is here on another case.
Sure.
But I just wanted to apologize for coming here last week on late notice. I didn't realize that you folks hadn't received the plans, and the timeliness was not appropriate. And I appreciate you giving us the continuances that you have given us
Sure.
for these projects. Now that you have the plans, and hopefully you've had a chance to review them, what I've done is just kind of outline our proposal, and I've highlighted my plan to show you exactly what's at stake here. And as you may recall, there are 2 notices of intent that have been filed, each proposing the construction of a single-family home on First Parish Road. I have this map here, which is actually a site plan, which shows both lots, and it shows the proposed construction of each lot. It shows the location of the house, where the septic is proposed, the driveway. And it also shows the location of this isolated wetland that has been delineated by myself and by your consultant, Steve Ivas. There's a couple of little areas that are smaller, isolated areas that show up on the plan. And it's been my feeling all along that these wetlands that are shown here as isolated wetlands were not wetlands at some previous time. They don't show on any historic maps. They don't show on any USGS map. There was perk tests conducted throughout this area that presumably, would have had the permission of the Conservation Commission if there were wetlands out there. So this whole area has been pockmarked, if you will, and now it has developed some vegetation. And since the soils have been turned over, sometimes you see evidence of hydric soils within the first 8 to 10 inches of soil. So regardless of that, Steve Ivas and I have flagged these areas, and they are shown on this new plan. What we're proposing to do doesn't meet your bylaws. Your bylaws, as you know, say that you have to stay at least 50 feet away from resource areas, and in some cases you have to stay 100 feet away. With this wetland system located where it is, this property is undevelopable. There's no place on either property that would be greater than 100 feet away that we could do any kind of development. So with that understanding, and in looking at your bylaws, we requested a variance from you folks. That variance request was put in writing. It was probably about 3 months ago when your former agent was here. And what we are now proposing to do is provide some mitigation for that variance. We understand that this is a wetland area under your bylaws. However, if we can't alter it, there's no way that we can do any kind of work on the property. And we've come up with some mitigation. Mitigation will include anything north of this orange line will be donated to the town of Scituate. It will be conservation land, or however the town wants to use it, or see fit. There is a potential vernal pool off the property, and this donation would serve to protect that vernal pool. That's one of the mitigation measures we're offering. Another mitigation we're proposing is to replicate this area. There's about 5,400 square feet of wetlands in this area. We are proposing a one-to-one replication of that wetland in this area that was, that's upland, and it will kind of fill in this whole area here in terms of bordering vegetated wetland. And the client has also offered to donate $5,000 to the town to be used in whatever purposes the commission sees fit, whether it's towards some open space development or towards some educational fund, or however that may work for you. Because we can't meet the bylaws, we understand that we will require variance, and we're coming to you offering these mitigation measures as a way to try to mitigate for the loss of this land and to try to develop it in a way that is consistent with the neighborhood, it's consistent with the zoning, and consistent with your open space plans, which do have some other open space adjacent to this property that we're proposing to donate. So we understand that, we proposed this variance to you, like I said, about 3 months ago, but we didn't have a whole lot of specifics. We're here tonight with more specifics as a way to try to provide some mitigation or some compensation towards the loss of this isolated wetland in the front of the property. And another point, which is a little bit different here, but when this line was first delineated, I had done this line, this back line. And when I had gone through the files for this property, there was a line that was approved that was way back here at some point. There was another line that was approved a little bit further south. When we got this line approved, this back BVW, that was the most aggressive line on this property that has ever been proposed and approved by the commission. So now we're proposing to make that wetland even larger by putting in a one-to-one wetland replication and donating that whole parcel to the town for their use and protection.
Okay.
Nope, I have all
Actually, you
the
know
info.
what, Steve, can we just hear from,
Yeah,
you
let's
mind?
see.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. First of all, I would like to disagree wholeheartedly with Lenore White's first point. It's just a pockmarked area. If you go out there, I can show you areas where there are clay soils under very, very dark, black, organic soils with mature red maples adjacent to them. Not perk tested, they have been there for a long, long time, okay, in the center of this area. So that's number one. I believe that this isolated vegetated wetland, or vegetated wetland under your bylaw, is indeed something that's been there a long time. And as a result of looking at these most recent plans, I have just a couple of comments on it. First of all, the plans don't show stone walls that are on the property as required by your own rules and regulations. In fact, we climbed over a stone wall right at IVWE 14. It's not shown on the plan. Secondly, I am sure that Ms. White, as a former member of DEP, is well acquainted with something called the Inland Wetland Replication Guidelines. These guidelines have not been addressed at all within this filing. If you're going to do a replication area, you need to know that the replication area will be successful. You need to know exactly where the water is. You need to show some elevations. You need to show some grades. And then you need to choose some plants. None of that work has been done. And I'm sort of surprised, but it's shown as a replication area with no grades at all, as if there's no grades required as well. So the filing to me is incomplete, and I'll leave it there.
Can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, but I guess I would somehow appreciate the fact that you're coming to us was sort of a proposal to get an idea whether we're interested or
Thank you.
not. And
Thank you.
if we were entertaining that, then you'd do more to do that, and if not, I appreciate what you're saying, Steve, that if that were to be done, so I'm not gonna take it either way.
Thank you,
That,
'cause that's
something's
exactly our
missing, that, there's no point in spending thousands to find out that you can't do that, so I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that if they were to go forward, that would need a lot more, so how's that for,
Fine with me.
Thank you.
We can agree on that.
okay? Penny?
No, this has been going on for so long, I have all the info I need, I know.
Todd?
I don't have any questions.
Kevin?
I don't know, the thing that kind of just caught my eye was in that last hearing, you said 6 to 8 inches of brown soil is an indicator in Massachusetts, and then you just came up here and said that, you said 8 to 10 inches of hydric soils were irrelevant on this property.
No, I didn't say that. What I said was, there are some hydric soils out there. There's no doubt about
Right.
that. But the fact that it's been turned over and perk tests have been conducted makes those, when you look at a profile, you're looking at a profile that's basically undisturbed, like we did on that other site. This site, the whole site's been disturbed. So when you look at that profile, you have to look at it with the understanding that, yeah, there's been a backhoe in there and it's turned up some of the soil, and so you don't really know what it looked like, frankly. And you can see the number of test pits that are throughout this
Yeah,
property
yeah.
here. And as far as being a historic wetland, it's not shown on any of the resources that I was able to find. Not that
Okay.
that's, a definitive answer, but,
All right.
so,
Thanks.
that would be my response.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
there have been no test pits in the majority of this area that is shown in red here. And in fact, this is where I found the hydric soils, right in here. There have been no test pits except right on the edges here.
Well, I'm not sure this plan shows all the test pits that have been done over the years, Steve.
Well-
These are test pits for this purposes.
And I have in my notes places where I took soil tests, and they show 8 inches of very black organic soil overlaid soils, right in the center here, okay? Adjacent to, again, some facultative trees. Just to let you know that this area has not been disturbed. It doesn't look disturbed either. Again, you've got your natural soils over your other natural soils, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, and I'd probably agree with most of that, except that knowing a little bit more of the history about this, the fellow that lived in this house ran heavy equipment, so it's hard to know
Yeah.
that all of that is
It's
not disturbed,
There's
because,
certainly some that's not.
right.
That's all,
Oh,
that's the
okay,
point.
yep, but I wouldn't be
That's the
surprised that a fair amount of it over the years did get
Oh, I would agree.
disturbed as well.
It's absolutely, a lot of it's all mixed up. So my contention is that there may have been a wetland there a long time ago that connected down to the BVW.
And we also know, but I mean, we also know that this just travels into a huge red maple swamp as well.
Exactly.
Right, which is
Exactly.
totally different from what you see on the site today.
Mhm.
And just one final comment, I appreciate you pointing out that we haven't submitted everything, and if the commission were to approve this project, I would hope it would be with the condition that we design a replication plan that would come before you for approval before it gets implemented, as a
Mhm.
condition.
Okay. Richard?
I don't have any questions
Pat?
as far as it goes.
Well, I just had 2 points to make. Under the Wetland Protection Act, DEP requires that, you avoid wetlands wherever you can, you minimize any alteration of wetlands, or you replicate. And it doesn't appear that there's an attempt to minimize the wetland disturbance here. I mean, there's 2 house lots put in, maybe there could have been some other plan that it caused less disturbance. And the other thing is just within your own town bylaw, which I've been here a week and a half, it prohibits the disturbance of more than 2,500 square feet of wetland, and this is calling for over 5,000. And once you hit 5,000, the Army Corps of Engineers gets involved if you're gonna fill that much wetland. So this is a complicated proposal.
Right, and we understand that, and we accept that, and we understand that the bylaw limits us to 25,000, which is why we're requesting a waiver, because there's no way you can put anything out here and meet the bylaw. So that's why we had to go the waiver route.
But you also realize that there's a lot of property not built on in Scituate because it just doesn't meet the,
I don't know, you know better than I do, but I assume, I'm sure there's property in every town that doesn't get built on for one reason or another, and I appreciate that, but
okay.
we've done our best here to try to work with the town to protect this wetland in the back. You know, we understand that there are some, jurisdictional wetlands out front. They're located in such a location that it makes development of the site impossible, but not for a variance. So, and that's exactly what we're here to request.
Okay. Right. Anybody on the audience? Okay.
I make a motion to close.
Second.
Anything you want to add?
No, he's just
No.
asking the difference between a waiver and a variance.
Okay,
I would say they're the same.
pretty much.
Okay.
Okay.
Moved and seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. May I ask when we would be making a decision? Would that be at the next public meeting, or?
I think we're going to discuss this and probably just do it at the next meeting.
Okay.
I'd like a little time to give Pat a chance to wade in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Carbone, 25 Townway Extension, install septic tank, or install tank.
Actually, it's a, I think.
And that got the Board of Health approval. Okay, and is there anybody here for Carbone? Well, we did all that, right? We just waiting on Board of Health?
I
Am I
make a
right?
motion to close.
Oh, what?
Oh,
But this, remember,
I wasn't here for it, so.
and just when we talked about that cover post, so that they know how much cover is over the septic system, there's a stick that they can have coming up off of the top of it, so if they lose cover.
Benchmark.
The
Oh,
benchmark.
Benchmark.
That, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I would request that we ask for a benchmark
Okay.
Which we can do in the orders.
in the orders, right, that was my only comment, that's it, sorry.
Anybody else?
I
Okay.
make a motion to close.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Vogel, 327 Central Ave.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman? Tom Pizarski from Merrill Associates. Unit 427. You're out. Can I put this here? Is that okay?
Carol's seen enough of these. She's pretty happy to just.
I don't want to be rude and block her. Okay, since we were here last time, we were asked to do a few things, and I think we've effectively done that. We were asked to consult with our wetland scientists, which we did do, to come up with a mitigation plan along the salt marsh area. This is going to provide a strip here. This is more than 2-to-1 for the footprint that is being altered here. And we have a total of 52 species that are planted here. And the species which were selected are indigenous natural species that would survive next to a salt marsh. And we'll put the notes here for planting them in the order to be planted, and they will survive and progress upgrade. We changed the driveway area from asphalt to previous pavement. We shrunk the size of the steps down to more of the existing steps. We went to the Board of Health. I met with her over placement of the tanks to ensure they were accessible for maintenance purposes. They are, she's comfortable with that, she's notified you folks of that effect. And we are proposing that the colors be raised to gray for ease of access. We provide planting details. We do have one tree that is dying that we would like to replace in constitute an evergreen, an existing evergreen. And you can see that in the line of erosion control measures. The retaining wall, the executive split face retaining wall, we're putting that up with the quantity wall we have. I believe that's all it was asked for.
Okay?
Thank you very much,
Welcome.
especially that driveway.
The height thing, you talked to Neil about the
Yes, the
elevation?
architect did, and we will be above the floodplain, and we will be in compliance with construction for the new regulations in the building code.
Fair enough.
Richard?
Nice job.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just had a question. Does the North River protective order come into play for this section of the river?
No, sir.
It's only in,
That's the South River.
And that's the
okay,
South
so
River.
it doesn't connect at all, that, okay.
Well, it does, but up at the peak, within 300 feet.
They don't have any jurisdiction on it,
Right.
okay. And then for the Rivers Protection Act, are you required to leave the first 100 feet undisturbed if possible, or allowance is made if it's currently lawn? I mean, I think it's up to commissions. I'm trying to get a feel as to,
Well, that's a good question, because this is a unique situation where this is a lot that existed prior to August 1st, 1996. And the lot was created in 1941. The house has been there for quite some time, since the 50s. And the analysis and the development is limited to the lot itself. And in this case, the entire lot is in the riverfront area. So therefore, what we've done here is, the proposed addition, as you can see out in the back there, we're leaving the minimum envelope that's required to perform the construction, get it done. We're not filling in any floodplain, so we're not taking any wetlands restoration here. And I think the next important thing that needs to be looked at is, under the Rivers Protection Act, are we leaving this in a better situation next to the river area there? And I think we clearly are, because we're taking, when you look at the act, there's a 1-to-1 replication. We have a 2-to-1, and I know Scituate requires under the bylaw 2-to-1 restoration of that riverfront area with indigenous species. That'll provide a whole variety of benefits to the,
I saw you had the percentage of disturbance within the riverfront.
yes, sir,
total.
and we're below that too.
It's below 10.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Learning the ropes of.
Yeah.
Good one. That's great.
Okay. Anybody in the audience?
Yeah, Steve Bjorkman. I'm just curious, are they requiring bolt-down covers on the septic out here?
Yes, we are. Waterproof, yep.
All right.
What about the cover thing for this too?
I think this one's a little different,
The benchmark?
yeah.
Oh, 'cause it's a
They're
pump.
gonna have the covers, yeah, it's right there. I
Okay.
make a motion to close.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this-
Good to see you again, Patrick.
We want to show cause for Dealey, 315 Central Ave?
Excuse me?
No, did not
We're
you.
looking for someone else.
315 Central Ave.
Oh, I'm
Couple
sorry.
doors up.
Chris Deely, the homeowner Elizabeth Sherman.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
As the letter explains, the initial letter, we went out December 23rd and shoveled all the silt off against the fence and stapled the plastic silt fence back up. And then we got the other letter and invited us in here, so we just put a whole new silt fence in. And you're right, it was built up pretty good, so we replaced it. And it did its job, but nothing came through the fence that was there originally. And I have some pictures that we did put a new fence in, so. I saw it. Yeah, I saw it today.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You did.
Yeah.
Yep, good. Thanks.
Anybody else want to see pictures?
Sure. In there.
You been there?
So how much longer does your orders run for, Chris, do you know? Any
I
idea?
don't know. I don't know that
All
answer.
right, maybe you want to have you got familiar with the orders? Do you, have you?
I
Okay.
did, I looked at it, I read them,
All right. So,
but you're right, it might be coming up.
why don't you take a look at that? We appreciate your securing this. And Richard's been out there and feels that it's satisfactory. And
I
Pat?
think Pat's been,
Okay. So, but I think you ought to take a look at your orders. I guess you're not the first person to
Right.
be on the site, so you're correcting a few wrongs or whatever.
Yeah.
But why don't you just make sure you're familiar with that, and if you need to get an extension before that runs out, it'd be a good idea to do that. We appreciate some of these take a while, and then multiple people get involved, and then things aren't, so, not critical of your work, but to make sure that we're in compliance, and we,
The boating season, it gets cold, all that stuff.
all right.
Yeah, I just had one comment, on an area like that where there's gonna be soil disturbance, stuff like that, sometimes those straw wattles don't hold up as well as some of the other types of erosion control, like the sock or a hay bale would last 2 or 3 times as long, probably those things are pretty fragile,
It's
so.
amazing, pull them off, they really do work though.
Yeah, they do, they'll
They
catch
work.
the, yeah, they're
Everything,
low, they'll
yeah,
catch, but
yeah.
some of the other ones, well, if you're gonna be working on it for 6 months or a year, sometimes the other ones are a little longer lasting.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that whoever started this project probably had, or should have had a pre-construction, but then they were gone and you just kept going, but technically, you want to make sure that you're real familiar with that. But I'd definitely look at,
The dates, yes.
yeah, okay? So that you don't have to file all over again or something like that. Okay.
Do you want these pictures back?
Yes.
Actually, can we keep them in our folder? Would that be a problem?
Evidence, that's good, yes.
Okay. Super. Well, thank you very much. You understand our concerns. You went through the whole process when we filed the notice. And the idea is that we keep silt and debris and things from going into the marsh. And so it's up to you or the contractor to make sure that those are maintained. And it seems like you're on the right track. Okay? But check your orders and make sure that you're gonna be able to finish your project before they expire. And if not, come back and get an extension.
Yes,
Okay?
definitely.
Thanks. Who's waiting for what? Well,
17 New Driftway?
up at the top, under administrative items.
Oh. All right, 17 New Driftway. And what do we what is that for?
Maybe the applicant can talk about what he's planning on doing beside the building and the size of it and that kind of stuff, so.
I'm not actually the applicant, I'm the owner of the property. The applicant is Jim Burke and Joni Wilson. They've applied for a building permit.
So your name,
Bob Berwick,
okay, Bob.
trustee of Greenbush Realty Trust.
Yep.
Owner of the property. And they've applied for a building permit, the Burkes have, to convert the existing maintenance building to a takeout pizza facility. And as part of their renovation plan, they need a 7-foot by 7-foot area outside the building for their wood-fired pizza oven.
Yep.
And I believe building inspector has sent it over to you people for review, since there is an order, and there is an existing
Is
order
that the
of
only plan we
conditions.
have? Is that the only plan that we?
I don't, I
We
have no.
didn't get any.
So Bob, can you just bring that up here, I guess?
It's in the office in the file. So it's right behind the face.
So, we have an existing orders on this, and I don't know whether anybody else remembers, but last year there was some concerns about some of the siltation along the fence, and Jim went out, and Bob was good enough to work with
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
And Jim came back, he was very happy with
What they did.
Correct.
Okay.
work that you did there, so we appreciate your
Yep.
effort. The other thing that happened here that you might want to remember is that some of this was altered when the town sewered this, that they put in the pump and the swale, and they probably did more. more- Yeah.
They had a couple of blowouts during.
So
Right.
where is it you want to
Okay,
actually do
So
this?
if you look at the building,
So when you come in the Driftway right
Yep,
now.
there's the
they built
ice
this
house.
Ice piece, and then the dance studio.
Right,
and the
restaurant.
Right.
and so as you come, here's the building.
Oh,
existing
okay,
building
now I
here,
know where you're talking,
okay?
yeah.
And the existing building, the roof line goes straight across here. This is the proposed 7-foot by 7-foot bump out area to encompass the wood fire pit for the pizza oven. They need to place it outside the building.
So it's going,
So it's going right here. It's a 7 by 7. They need to pour a pad for a 7 by 7 enclosure, 7 feet by 7 feet.
so this could be an amendment to our orders. So this is all parking.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, it's all impervious.
This is where the town put in the sewer pump
Correct.
generator piece.
So should he just file for an amendment?
I think that's what he's asking for.
Oh, oh, right now. Oh, I'm sorry.
It needs to be advertised and everything, you know that.
No, so we can't do it.
That's kind of what I was just.
This
Sure.
is just a discussion of possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Fire.
If I may, Greg Morse, because I'm probably going to get involved, I did the original permitting here. If we file for an amendment on this project, I understand the requirements for re-notification of the abutters and the legal advertisement. I guess I'd ask on the applicant's behalf if the commission would consider a waiver of the filing fees. When requesting an amendment, the commission asks for a filing fee equal to the original filing. And with this project, the original filing included a new building, it included all of the site work, and this is a rather small modification. I'm wondering if there might be any relief granted to that local requirement. If this was coming in just in context as a brand-new filing, it would be in addition to a building, the filing fee would be $110. So I don't have the exact number what the original filing fee was, but given the scope of the original filing, I think it was rather significant. And you might be able to help a local business by granting that.
It was substantial.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Well, you did a lot.
No,
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking at this and looking at all the work that they did and all the things that they filed for and that they've been in compliance, and this is a pretty insignificant
It is.
piece, is what I'm thinking, but.
It's really just.
You
about
said it's like 7 by 7?
7 by 7,
So 140.
44.
44 square feet.
49 square feet.
49 square feet.
49 square feet.
I don't even,
Yeah.
I don't, the waiving the fee part down to 110 is totally fine with me. I have no problem with that.
I'd just like to keep this as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Mr. Bjorklund?
Yeah, I just have a comment. If it's 49 square feet of impervious area, if he can give you back 49 square feet and make it pervious somewhere around the building, can it be seen as within the scope of the original project and just let him go and do it? It's pretty insignificant.
Yeah, I'm
It's
for that.
149 square feet.
No, no, no.
No,
No,
49, 49,
49.
49,
Okay.
less than 50
Sorry.
square feet.
I know, I was doing.
Even-
That's the
I got
problem.
my mind on the
Even in,
blocks
even
to
in
protect
trade school,
Hummer.
7 times 7 is,
49.
Why I did 144, I don't know.
Less than a half acre.
You were thinking 12 by 12.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, sorry.
I'd be,
That makes sense.
is there any place that you think you can work that out, Bob?
Yeah, we could do that. Let me open this up. Where the egress gate is at the very back of the property out to Ford Place, we could remove 50 square feet in front of the gate and put crushed stone there. They're both between 100 and 200 riparian.
Yeah, that or, I don't know, honestly, a couple in between these trees, because you guys haven't planted the pears, right?
there's-
Oh, yeah, I've
Yeah,
put-
but
There's
that's-
that swale,
yeah.
oh, you did.
But
plant
that's
the
already
trees.
impervious.
You're right, I see, okay.
It's
Yeah,
off,
I'm just saying
these
if
are
you-
off the pavement.
He's totally, just
We-
tell me
No,
yeah,
I'm just
Bob.
thinking like
Right
if
now,
we
just
were
say,
gonna-
yeah, no problem.
Throw some extra bushes in over there.
Tell him you'll take out
I'd be
twice as much.
Happy to do more,
Well, I just-
more
I mean,
planting.
well, Do it.
I know, what's this gonna do?
What
over
is
there?
that? That's
Yeah.
just, sorry,
Well,
it's
I'd be
not gonna
happy to do more
anything,
plantings.
It's silly.
Yeah,
That's
it
why I'm
is.
just wondering if it was better to put some bushes along the swale or something.
Be
I don't-
happy to add twice as many plantings there.
Instead of taking out a little bit
That almost
of.
makes
Yeah.
more sense.
It does make more sense.
Yeah.
Okay? Sounds
Sorry,
good to me.
No, my math is.
Okay.
Do 49 trees.
Wait a minute, how about 7?
49 or 144 trees.
Yeah, 140, yeah.
All right. Okay. Get us some little sketch with what you're gonna put there and
Okay,
knock yourself out.
okay,
All right?
great, thank you.
They're all that easy.
That does look nice, Bob.
Thank you.
The work that you've done along there and along the Herringbrook, appreciate it. Thank you. I know when I worked there when I was a kid, we were trying to kill the knotweed with, I don't even wanna know.
It's a lot easier to allow a minor revision when the site is in great shape and the
Right.
stormwater's working and everything.
Yeah. What else have we got? I'm just, we wanna get on to some minor business. I'm trying to clean up what anybody's hanging here for.
The amendment request for Lot B, 4B in Man Hill and Hood Road,
Oh, right.
where they wanna, do the plantings in the swale instead of,
Do we have anybody from Grady here for that?
no.
Did they make a request?
Yeah, and we got a plan showing what they wanna do
Okay.
instead of, what they're gonna do now. We had told them in the orders they had to leave the tree line
Right.
here and keep this. That they're not doing. So in here, they came up with this proposed planting plan. And, but on top of that, Todd and I had originally asked for them to put, trees along this whole line, the 50-foot.
Pat, when this,
So the new thing would just be the buffer.
when we had the hearing
I
on
mean,
this
the-
piece of property, we were debating, this is sort of like a retention area, but it was essentially gonna wind up a lawn. And we're debating whether to do that, and at the time, we said to the applicant, well, is there any need to clear any of this? Can we just leave all this vegetated? And the engineer agreed to that evening without consulting with his client. And he went back and the client said, no, we really had hoped to put a lawn here. So we were looking to see whether they could do additional mitigation over here.
But we want, I personally, and I believe Todd feels the same way, that we still want them to plant, not just in the basin, but along the top here, the trees.
Okay.
We had said in the orders to mark off the 50-foot buffer with the 4-foot plantings.
Mhm.
And after they brought this in, I started looking at it a little bit differently, that they're gonna fill this with wetland plants or native plants.
Mhm.
And it's in the 100-foot buffer, and it's gonna hold the water. In the second page, it shows the drainage going from here all the way to this outlet, where
Yeah.
they're gonna have a pipe that goes down into the wetland.
Mhm.
I kind of feel as though this now, to me, becomes the wetland, and the actual markings, either the things that say, like the post that says conservation area, stay
Should
out.
now be up here.
Yeah.
Fine?
I mean, they can't have it both ways,
Right.
you know.
That's fine.
So we asked for the planted row of every 4 feet on center conservation post markings, like per the bylaw, just asked for it on contour line 46 then,
Okay.
to the edge of the,
Yep. And then, is there still another row of plantings that you want to see shown here?
I don't know, something, and it's, we overlooked this though, but when you look at this, how are they, we never talked about this, but the pipe actually goes into the wetland. So they're gonna go into the wetland to have that pipe come out, and presumably by their pictures, it looks like there's some sort of erosion type of thing at the end of it. I just didn't look at that during the hearings, but how do they
I don't
go-
remember seeing
I
that.
don't remember seeing it either
Oh,
until this.
okay. So then how do they do that? How do you lay that pipe without digging a trench into the wetland? You
Can't.
don't. You don't.
Well, can they pull that back, do you think?
Your guess is as good as mine, Frank.
But if they
This is
pull it
probably
back-
better, to be
if they-
honest with you.
if they
I'm
pull
sorry,
it
say-
back-
They gotta come in and explain all this.
Yeah.
So, we have to re-advertise it, you're just actually stating whether you'll accept this as an amendment, type of thing. And then, it's gonna be like a regular.
Yeah,
hearing.
well, we want to have, then, they can come in and go through this. Okay.
But I think you all got one of these plans in your packet
Okay.
last week. Yeah.
I remember
You
I
should
should
have
look and
it.
see if I have this whole blue thing in my,
Well, take mine,
I
because
know
I
I
won't
haven't
be here
seen
for the next meeting.
so
And
they're
they'll
saying
be
it's
coming up.
three. Oh, then they're still gonna have it there.
You can take mine, because I
Oh, I
won't be
have
here
one.
for the next.
Oh,
all
okay.
all
No,
right.
I have
Well,
it here.
then does somebody else want this? Because I won't be here when it's meeting.
I'll take it. Nobody else wants it.
On the 4th.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
You're okay, Aldi.
All right, so we're going to advertise for them for the next,
Yeah, so you're
Based
gonna
on what we just
accept
talked
this
about.
as
go
an
ahead,
amendment.
Pat.
Yeah.
Did they come with a counter proposal after that triangle piece wasn't gonna be a trade-off, or is this something that?
Kevin Grady called me at the time we were without an agent to ask about this, and I told him I thought the only way that he could grasp that area was to request an amendment to his orders, because we had already closed the hearing.
All right, so he's expecting some plantings will be included.
Yeah, so if he wants to change this piece, at the time that we closed it, we had told him we wanted certain plantings. It might be best that either you and Todd get with him and just run through that prior to that meeting would be a good idea.
Yeah.
All right? You're familiar with it,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
We should look at the original plan and see if that pipe was in there.
Oh, this Gardner. I don't know what's going on down here.
28 Otis, 32 Gardner.
And Indian Trail, just before you get into Cohasset, remember the guy went and cleared the whole sidewalk in his yard? And there was a drainage ditch, an easement that the town had, and I think he's saying now that the town had no permission to do it, and I don't know what's going on. But he's in the wetlands, he was clearing right down the wetlands, right?
Mr. Morse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you weren't on that one.
This is Ayers.
Yep.
Okay.
Bill Ayer. So, I was contacted by the heirs after they came in here for their show cause hearing or whatever, I think back in September. He had indicated to me that the commission requested that he stabilize the site by installing an erosion control barrier at the down gradient limit of work, and he did. He installed a hay bale line at the pretty much the most down gradient portion of his site. Secondly, the exposed soils on the site, he had thrown a grass seed around all the exposed soils. I think portions of the grass came up. It was kind of late in the season by the time he had done that, so there's definitely still exposed soil there, but portions of the grass seed have come up. I think the commission asked him to prepare a plan showing the extent of his work and where the wetlands were on the property. So we went out, we surveyed the lot. It's a vacant lot. You have the plan there, and it has frontage on Gardner Road. And it basically grades all the way down to the back of the property. At the back of the property, you have a salt marsh out back. You also have land subject to coastal storm flowage at either, I think it's elevation 10 or 11 on the plan. This whole project, I guess, came about because there were some trees that were between his property and the neighbor's property. He and the neighbor had an agreement to take the trees down for views, from what I understand. They took the trees down, and then the neighbor says that wasn't the case, and I think called the commission. So, it also, we found during this whole thing, the town had installed a drainage system on Gardner Road. The town has an easement over the neighbor's property to construct a drainage system down to the salt marsh. The town constructed a new drainage system, I think in 2005, 2006, but they did not construct it in the easement. They constructed it on my client's property, approximately 20 feet away from where it should be. So, my client, I guess what he's interested in doing is working with the town either to move the easement to where it should be, or talk about the potential.
Move the easement or move the drainage?
Sorry, move the drainage to where it should be in the easement, or the potential for constructing a new drainage system from Gardner down my client's property to convey the water to the salt marsh. The system that the town installed, to me, really wasn't an appropriate system in that location. There's a series of catch basins in Gardner that discharge to a flared end section right at the edge of the road at my client's property. And then the town basically installed what are called gabion bags, which are bags of wire mesh filled with stone about the size of this table and installed almost flush with the ground. And the purpose of those is to dissipate the water, into a sheet flow condition. And that condition has made my client's property rather wet, rather mucky. But I think what the intent, if we were to build a new drainage system on my client's property, would be to build more of a swale, either a grass swale or a stone swale, from that outlet at Gardner down to the land subject to coastal storm flowage, so that any drainage coming off the street, is conveyed out, as opposed to sheet flowing over his property. And that's
There was
that's where we
also,
stand.
I think, a bunch of trees that blew down, and
Yeah.
we had some pretty severe winds, but all that area was also disturbed. I mean, these trees didn't snap, they were uprooted from soft soil.
Yeah.
Did you ever do a wetlands delineation there?
We had Brad Holmes come out with a wetlands delineation. Well,
Kind of hard to do because it's all chewed up.
exactly. We had him come out and give us a consultation. Definitely, we could flag the salt marsh down at the bottom. We just located the edge of the salt marsh by survey. If you were to say that there was a BVW at one point up top, it's devoid of vegetation right now. And the only way really to do a delineation would be to do it by soils. And of course, you're gonna get hydric soils where those gabion bags were recently installed, because they're dissipating the water. We have plans from Neil Murphy dated during the late 1990s that show a drainage ditch on the property. They don't show any sort of BVW. There's also a plan that I think the town DPW had that did show a portion of that as being BVW, though. It's an interesting. I did notice.
Pat, did you have a chance to look at it?
No, I learned about this one today, but I just had a question. Is Public Works involved in this whole situation yet? Are they aware of?
Very, very limited. I had a 2-second conversation with Kevin Cafferty and asked if I could talk about a drainage easement on private property. The response was, well, we'll just take that. And that was that.
Yeah, because, it sounds like it needs a visit and some more investigative work. And I think usually, as you brought up, the first thing would be to get a delineation, just so you know what you're working with. The salt marsh would probably be easier to delineate, but to go through the soils just to see if there has been an alteration of an upland well.
Well, there's definitely been some alteration, and they were working in some places where they absolutely should not have been.
Yeah, I agree.
I also believe, if you get down near the edge of that marsh, that there's a brand-new 4-inch drain pipe installed. That, I don't know where that came from, but, so, these guys did more than they should have here by far. And we were pretty reasonable. They came in, we said to them, get going on a program. I know at one point you asked me if we could meet out there and take a look, but it really didn't seem that practical to me to do that, that they have to not only do the plan that you have here, but we need to figure out to some degree where the wetlands might be. Maybe looking at the neighbor's property as well might help us a little bit with that. I mean, it's muddy, wet, awful soil, and now it doesn't have many trees on it either. So, you know, we're at that time of year when there's not a whole lot that can be done with that, and I do appreciate the issue with the drainage. I'm not quite sure how they're gonna resolve that. And I don't see the point in these gabion baskets either. I mean, they're almost flush, unless they've silted up, unless there was more of a depression at one point, and now they've just filled up with mud. I don't know.
Certainly possible, yeah.
And those were placed by the town?
Yeah, that was installed by the town, that system.
Yeah, I think we need to start with Public Works and pay a visit. From what I understand on this type of situation too, it's harder to do an after-the-fact notice of intent, because it's probably work that wouldn't be allowed anyway. So, I mean, you're either looking at some type of voluntary repairs that...
Restoration, yeah.
Yeah, or an enforcement order where you kind of hold people's feet to the fire to get it done. But, I mean, we really need to go up, take a look and...
I almost see this as two different situations. The situation that we originally got involved in, or the call was on, was that they had cleared this land right down to the marsh. And the easement, the drainage swale, that kind of came in secondhand, where, is that our problem, or is that DPW's problem? I mean, what we asked them to do was to get out there to delineate it back there and put the buffer zones in, because he really was doing work where he shouldn't have been, and to start from there. And now he's coming back with the counter of about the easement and the pipe. I hear him, but I think that should be directed strictly to DPW, and we're still dealing with, we don't have any lines on this, except where the salt marsh is. And he clearly cleared where he had no right to. So I think it's just getting all, by bringing in the pipe now, it's just convoluting what he was originally brought in for.
Right.
And that was for clearing where he shouldn't have been.
Todd?
He knows where this drainage easement was supposed to be, yet he completely denied where that other pipe that runs right through his property comes from and drains into the marsh. When I was on the site with him, I asked him, I was like, oh, what's that? And he, oh, I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
So
he's just deflecting, I feel, right now, what we originally asked for.
I wasn't here when this first started, so this is...
Kevin? Go ahead.
In his defense about the 4-inch pipe, I don't know if he installed that or not. I know that I have done significant work in the Indian Trail neighborhood, and there are pipes all over the place from all sorts of people. And I think there's a pipe that comes under the street too. One of the neighbors was saying that discharges onto that property. So I don't know that I don't think we can safely say that he installed that second pipe yet. I'm not.
He's owned the property for quite some time though.
I think about 10 years.
Okay. Well, I think we need to know try to determine roughly where the wetlands are, and I think they should be filing an NOI to do a restoration.
What about as far as the DPW goes?
Go see DPW.
You know, at some point in all of this, the DPW they can work through that. I mean, obviously, they're gonna say that some of this shouldn't be wetlands, but that's really, as you point out, there's almost two separate pieces going on. But if we don't see some more positive action, then we have to evaluate our stance on this. And I realize it's the winter, but we're getting this in a little bit of dribs and drabs, so I think they gotta step it up and get that moving.
At least give us some lines to go on.
and work towards that. But I think you should be filing an NOI to restore that.
Yeah.
I mean, would it help if I went out, talked to Public Works, and then wrote up something for you guys to consider, and then?
Well, I think they can make that part of it. Sure, you know, I'd be glad at some point for you to do that, because it does seem to be part of the issue. But that, to me, would be in the restoration piece. But, like I say, when you get out to take a look at this, it's clear that they went right into a resource area and flattened it and cut down a bunch of trees and things like that. And now this is, what, 2 months?
I think it's been more than that.
I lose
I
track.
think it was back in September.
So, yeah, I think that could all be part of it, Pat, and hopefully we can come to some way to figure out where this drainage is gonna go.
Yeah.
Because he threw the grass down.
But,
Yeah, I mean, he acted quickly once we contacted him, so I mean, he's owed a little something, because he did put the hay bales out and the wattle, and then he planted quickly.
okay.
But
He
he
was
couldn't
compliant
plant
at that
seed,
point,
he
it's just, where does it go from here? Are we gonna chase him down for 6 years to get him to plant it?
And like I said, then a bunch of trees came down because it was, you know, maybe some of them would
yeah.
have blown anyways, but the ground being disturbed was wet, and then a whole bunch more
Yeah.
Mhm.
mature trees blew over.
Yeah. So it's just, he's kind of,
Okay. Well, I think they can fix it, but.
yeah,
They
they
took
can.
out the
but
vines that
he
were holding it all
created
together.
a mess himself in one
Okay.
sense, you know, and of course,
So,
other stuff,
we're
but-
really not having a hearing on this at this stage.
no,
That's-
but we really need to, first things first, I think, and that's for him to do what we originally asked him to do. Give us some lines to go on, then we can start working, and then incorporate that pipe and so forth, whatever it is, from DPW to get that fixed. But he did do wrong, and he hasn't addressed it completely as we asked him
Okay.
to. Okay?
Order conditions for Anthony.
I make a motion to accept the orders as written.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And a certificate of compliance, 49 Seaside.
There's a lot of issues there.
Not sure
I
we
don't
can
know
issue.
what that one is, I don't even,
Did you take?
That was the one that I brought up about the, house where it's over by Sixth Pond, by
oh,
Egypt Beach.
that's right, yeah.
And they put in the fire circle where there was supposed to be mitigation, they dumped gravel onto the cobble up on the beach.
Was there an engineer that submitted a
So
plan?
the engineer went out and checked it and came back with a list of all kinds of things that are not correct, that
Okay.
aren't, that were done. I think the big thing is that in the orders, it states that no clearing under the houses to be done. It's a barrier beach. That's what the commission at that time wrote, and I think we should stand to it. I want the people that come after us to do the same for us when we write the orders, to say, well, there must have been a reason why they did that at the time. Let's
Honor it.
honor it, exactly. And it says not to clear, and it looked to me like they were clearing from under the house, among a lot of other things as well, so.
Bob Crawford, I think, had about 8 items. You have the file, don't you, for 49 Seaside?
49, yes.
He's closing on the house February.
6th.
Well, did anybody tell him that these things aren't done right, so we can't get a CC?
The engineer wrote it up, and I'm going out there on Friday to meet with the homeowner.
Okay.
Friday morning, and if anybody's interested in going out there. You know, sometimes if a few things are left over, a certificate of compliance, and it's minor, you can work with some. There's quite a few things that are
Yeah.
not done here. So, I mean, his issue is he's in a hurry to close on this, but, you know, the commission's gonna have to decide how they wanna see what's.
They all are in a hurry when they're
Right.
gonna sell it.
Right, right. So we do have another meeting before that date too, so that might help.
Okay. All right, that'd be great.
So if anybody wants to go, I think it's at 10, but I can let you know for sure. 10 on Friday.
I think he thinks it's a 10:15. wife had some of my.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Can we do the minutes for December 5th while I'm looking at it?
Sure.
I make a motion to accept the minutes for December 5th as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Conway School, this next Thursday.
So, have we forgot anything?
No, I'm Brenda Hunt. I was wondering what the status was about repairing the Peggotty Beach fence.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just, and I wanted to attend the meeting. I just was wondering, I know there's a question as to funding, but I know with that land, if we don't repair the fence, people are just gonna trample it.
Right.
There's already people all over it already, not in this weather, obviously. But I think, when I was communicating with Michael Clark, it was a suggestion that perhaps getting high school students in for community service to do the labor part of it under supervision with adults. I said I
Right.
would help, my husband would help. It's just the money to get the fencing.
Right.
A lot of the parts of the fence are, you could resurrect it. It's just that people now are stepping on it, so it's cracking, so forth. I mean, you could save a lot of that fence, but the longer we wait, the worse it's gonna get, and it's a mess. The last storm that took the poles down at the end of the beach,
Mm-hmm.
one of those telephone poles must have come up with the tide and knocked out a section. It's just laying there, so I
So,
mean, it needs.
This is the
work.
fencing at the entrance to Peggotty Beach, and we put it in the, maybe in the fall?
It was spring, I believe.
Was it that?
It was done, yeah, and it was done with these plastic cuffs that it was,
I'm thinking that this,
shoddy.
yeah. I
they-
think we got some mitigation
Yes.
money from, maybe Liam Vickers or something, and Jim went out there.
Yeah. It
with
was, it
them.
was in the spring.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
in
it
the
was.
spring.
Yeah.
So they put that fencing up at the entrance to Peggotty, it's just
Right.
snow fence
Right.
Yeah.
with stakes and sort of tied it on there, but then we had all that, when that storm overwashed it, just ruined all of that.
And, in addition to that, as we know, you'll have kids that go down at night, they have their campfires and they strip, pull those slats out and burn it. I think it's a great suggestion to have, as part of community service, have some kids come in and help out the adults. Anybody can volunteer, but it's just getting the money to get the material.
Right.
The longer we wait, the worse it's gonna be. And people, I mean, I've seen photographers go there and have 4 generations, all on the land taking pictures. I mean, people they'll just be all over that. And what you've protected up until this point, the birds, everything, it's just gonna get worse.
But is it just gonna keep getting broken down every storm? I mean, are we fighting against the tide there?
Well, some of these fences have to be that way. I mean, we
Yeah.
can't really
Yeah.
erect a structure, so
Right.
all we can do is put up some means of protection to keep people off the dune
Yeah.
and try to,
The other thing I was thinking is there's some metal posts that just don't hold up. I think if you were to get the wooden posts and dug them down and then took the U-nails and
Mhm.
really put it up correctly, I mean, the metal posts are just,
yeah, plus they rot after a while.
yeah, they're just, and then one other last thing I want to mention is the beach sticker fee. Can't we tap into that, the fees that are collected for all these parking stickers? Where is that money?
As far as I know, it goes into an enterprise fund that they do use to improve the parking lots.
But it's
But-
not
yeah,
us.
But without protecting that land, it's just gonna be abused.
I guess, why don't we do this? We'll request from the town administrator some money for this. We can ask whether or not the beach funds can be used. We don't have money in our budget for that, unfortunately. So why don't we send that to the town administrator, and you may want to as well, and if there's anybody else in the neighborhood that has a concern for that, the more the merrier. But we'll ask for that, and I'll ask whether or not any of the parking, because I do believe that goes into a, like an enterprise account, or
does that
parts of
mean?
it. Well, it just means that it's segregated from the town budget, so that, like with the mooring fees and things, they go into an enterprise fund, and then it's first used to restore pieces in the harbor. So there's certain funds that the town has that the money comes in and it stays within that entity. So maybe some of the money for the parking could be used for that. I don't know how that works, to be honest with you. But we can ask, and we can see whether they're willing to put some money towards that fencing.
Okay, that'd be great.
You know, the only option that we have is if someone comes in and offers mitigation for a site or something, and they are willing to do something like that in lieu of something else. I think that money, that particular money came from a project that was already done, and it didn't make sense to do some of the mitigation that was originally proposed. So they said, well, we'll use that wherever you deem necessary, and so we were able to do that fencing, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but why don't you let us ask the town?
Okay.
But at the same time, if it can't hurt to shoot a letter to the town administrator, the selectmen as well, expressing your concerns for that lack of fencing. So if we ask and you ask, and if it has maybe a few more of the residents right in that area, it can't hurt.
Okay.
All right? Not trying to pass the buck, but that's.
No, I can understand, and I understand that storms will take this fence up, but there is a purpose for it, as we know, and I think if it was done right back in the spring,
Mm-hmm.
good chance a lot of it would have been still holding
Well,
up
it's pretty
possibly.
hard to hold back Mother Nature, but
But I mean, the pole, the metal stakes that they used, they weren't viable when they were hooking them up with those plastic cuffs at the time. I think
Okay, well,
I think if it was done right, we might
let's
be in better shape.
see what we can do.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that you were sort of urged to talk to Mike was that Mike had come, he's a former Conservation Commission member. I believe he has maybe a daughter in the high school. And so he had expressed some interest in finding some projects that high school students could work on. So we're just sort of stuck in the middle, but he seemed willing to help out with some of that if, again, if we can get some materials. So let's see if we can do that.
Okay, great.
All right?
Great idea. Okay,
Thank you very much. Appreciate your concern.
Thanks.
And if you have any other thoughts or ideas on what might work there, we're glad
I've
to.
come up with money.
Or,
Yeah.
or what would
Or just get the
last?
money, yeah, that would help.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it.
Okay.
One interesting thing, because I live there, that parking lot, I know there's a big sign, no parking past 9 PM. I think if a cruiser went by there, spring and summer, and you just tag, $50 a whack. I'm telling you how much money could be generated. You cannot believe the amount, you get the.
I get
I'm
that.
trying to be creative here.
Yeah.
That's at the police station.
I don't know which fund that would go into, though.
Yeah.
Here on the beach fence.
There you go. All right.
Okay.
Well, let's see what we can figure out.
All right, great.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your concern as well.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Who physically put up the fence first? Is that
I
the
actually
town?
think it wound up being Jim O'Connell, a couple of contractors, and maybe the DPW was there a little bit, but it was, we didn't have a lot of
Who
money.
was the guy? I
I
forget
think it
who
was Liam Vickers.
Yes, it was,
It was
yeah.
Liam for the wall
It
up
was-
at Walnut Tree.
Right.
Yeah, it was Liam,
Oh.
yeah.
Right, or some plantings or something that didn't seem like they were really a viable thing, so he just said, listen, I can't do that, what can I do for you guys? And we said, well, geez, his timing was just such that we'd do the fencing, and he got a bunch of fencing and posts and stuff of the same value as the landscaping that he would have installed if I
Yes.
ate enough blueberries. I can remember that one. But that's where we got to, and then I think ultimately Jim wound up working with him and a couple other people to put up something, and it was just sort of makeshift, but it's no different than the fencing to some degree, we try to do with the Spit and a few other places. It's not meant to be a wall. It's supposed to just deter
stop
people from getting onto the marsh and things like that, but it's almost sacrificial. If we have a bad storm or something, it's not gonna stay there. So, and then how do you protect it from vandalism? You know, and you can't be putting up a chain link fence or something. We already had a hearing on that.
Yeah.
Right. Rosemary?
Could I just make one comment on that? and then-
Make two if you want.
One's enough tonight. One of the main purposes of the snow fencing is to trap sand, particularly in the winter. It does a tremendous job, so if it's in place,
Right.
it
Could actually
holds-
help that build up.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Would this be a point where I could ask a question regarding CRS of the conservation agent?
It's not a trick question.
No, it's not a trick question at all.
Well, we're gonna, if you wanna stick around, we really wanted to just get a chance to talk to Jim about a few, yeah, Patrick, we'll get that right.
First one.
Yeah,
Okay.
but ask first, go ahead.
I just wondered if in your contract, you were tasked with heading up the community rating system program?
I've talked about it with people from the building department, but I haven't seen it in the job description, but I'd be glad to meet and talk with somebody about it.
I think it was implied, if it wasn't there, we'll find out, because I think that was one of the questions we had back when we were talking.
Was Jim doing it when he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And the
imagine
agent
he'll.
before him has always had since the departure of our agent. Are you familiar with the program?
No, I haven't been using it all in Hanover, that's for sure, but I'd be glad to give you a call. Get you-
Well, I'm one of the former members of the committee, and there are people out there who still,
Yeah.
but, it's a program that helps, people in the floodplain lower their flood insurance premiums, but it requires the town, through the flood insurance, through the community rating system, to perform a number of tasks. And I'm sure Carol can tell you the manual is yay thick. There's a tremendous amount to it, and
I think what we did, Pat, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when, this was a discussion that you and Neil and I had, and I believe that Jim had just completed, is it like a 7-year, 5-year? So I think we just completed like the major piece of that, and so maybe it just needs a little updating, but when you say we've lost ground,
because you need to stay on top of it.
but I think we just completed the 5-year piece just like last year.
Okay, but everything takes planning.
Okay.
You know, how are we going to get these points?
Okay.
So for this period of time, we haven't moved forward at all, and we really, there's a lot more that could be done to lower the rates even further.
Okay.
Hopefully, we're staying at 10 for a while.
Well, I mean, I think we're gonna try to make that part of it. I think we did talk about it, but obviously, we've got a whole bunch of things to sift out. I appreciate you saying that that's one of them. Well, it's not the, you know, we will, and I appreciate your concern for that. No, I hear what you're saying.
Yes, I know you do.
But there's a whole bunch of things that have been sort of
Right.
pushed back a little bit over the past few months that we've got to get caught up on, so we'll certainly make it part of that process, because we don't want to fall behind or have anybody's insurance go up more either, if we can avoid it.
Please don't.
But maybe we should try to protect the beach first. Or the road. We can't stay here long enough tonight for all of that. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have?
Conway School.
Oh, yeah, the Conway School.
Yeah,
So on Thursday,
the 31st.
the 31st,
7 o'clock.
at the Mount Hope Improvement Building at Cedar and Clap Road, the students from the Conway School are gonna have an open meeting, and really hoping to get input from different user groups or concerned folks for the open space in the West End. Combination of the Bates Lane property and the Crosby property. And, you know, what we're hopeful is that folks will turn out and, you know, just tell us their likes and dislikes, what they're hopeful that we can do with the property, be it parking, trails, certain access, maybe handicap access. What do people use it for? You know, is it just for hiking, mountain biking, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, bird watching, whatever that is. And then also talk about some of the things that we'd like to see it additionally used for, maybe some wildlife or habitat enhancement. Do we want to see some forestry take place? Do we want to add some more hiking trails? Now that we're going to add the Higgins-McAllister piece, do we want to rethink our parking so that people can make certain loops? You know, those are the kind of things that I'm hopeful that will come up in that discussion. We also have the Appleton Field piece that's right now licensed to an organic farmer, and we're going to continue that with any modification. We're going to have a new access road going into the Crosby piece and the Appleton Field. Concerns for safety or vandalism or anything like that. So they're going to run the meeting. They've got an agenda, but I want to make sure that we touch on as many things as possible. We have care and custody of all that open space, and we should be the people that are out there trying to make sure that the town citizens get to use it the way that they want to. I mean, a lot of that was acquired with that CPC money, which everybody pays dearly for. And, you know, we want to make sure it's done responsibly. And so that's the idea on that, is hopefully develop a plan that we can start to institute and think about how we're using all that property. And I think most of you saw the plan that they had done for Marshfield, but it was pretty concise. It talked about the land, the topography, the habitat, all that sort of thing, and then how would we best utilize our property. You know, maybe there's some places that we don't want to see a lot of extra traffic. So that's going to happen on Thursday. It's the start of that. It's going to have to go fairly quickly, though, because this is students in a master's program, and this is one of they have a trimester. So they've already done one project, then this one, and then one more. So they're
They'll
going
be
to,
done with this at the end of March.
you know.
So
But they
it
seem
is
like
gonna
an
be
interesting
quick.
group, and
Yeah,
and,
no, they're nice kids.
we're just
They're-
hopeful that folks will turn out.
Carol sent a whole laundry list of different people she sent the news release to.
Okay.
And it was quite extensive. And then I got an email from Lisa, who was here tonight, Patoli, who was asking about 305. She's Sustainable Scituate, and they sent to their whole membership
Okay.
for that meeting. So I don't know. You might get a good-sized group, or you just might get the neighbors up there.
Okay.
But it should be interesting.
Great. All right.
And yeah, I guess that was that.
We had got a letter from a concerned citizen in Indian Trail about the projects that had been approved. And Carol's got a copy of that letter.
It's in your folder.
Okay. One of the points that this person brought up, though, is a property that I have a customer that I'm working for. So I'd like to recluse myself from that, and I'd like somebody else to take this up, I'd certainly be glad to talk. It was sort of, some of the things that are in this letter, just, I don't agree with, but I really think it's best that it be addressed by somebody else. And
Do we need to call him back? I mean,
no, I mean, we don't have to answer it at all, but it was just sort of disturbing because I think we've had 2 public hearings on 2 of the projects that he's mentioned, and they went through pretty extensive review by both
Yeah,
our
it was
commission.
more than a meeting each. They were at multiple meetings.
Right,
that
with
we kept
mitigation
following
and all
that.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Before I knew that this 3rd project was of concern, I called and discussed it as best I could, and tried to explain what has changed with some of the Board of Health and things like that. But I just feel that because I have some involvement there, I probably shouldn't take that further, and if somebody,
Did he send this to the Board of Health too? I mean, he's talking on the septics and this and that. You know, that really.
it came to the commission.
I don't think I asked him to send the Board of Health.
Right. So,
I don't know what he
Well-
really wants from us.
I don't either, other than just to be aware of his concerns, it seems.
And
okay.
we are, and we are aware of our own concerns.
Well, maybe at least we want to send back a letter that we've got that, and we'll take that into consideration.
I don't,
I think on both properties, we did the best we possibly could to make them do as much as possible. I mean, there's only so much of the area that was, I know the one that's on Indian Trail, there was only the front that was in our jurisdiction. The rest of the piece of property wasn't our jurisdiction.
no, that's because the wetland was across the street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like he's asking us for something that
Okay.
it isn't gonna happen. I mean, if you can only do what you can do, and the other one, yeah, that bunk Kavanaugh, that's a real questionable piece of property, but we did the best we could on that one too.
Right.
You know,
No,
I'm
I feel
happy
pretty
a house
comfortable
went
with
there,
that.
Very
but,
comfortable
you
with
know,
that.
we did everything we could. So it's almost like, yeah, maybe just a letter, thank you for your concern, and we will keep it in mind. But, you know, there's some more lots out there, they are gonna be developed. I mean, this fella here, Otis and Gardner, that's one where he just went and, that's just around the corner
Right.
from this fella too. And, so we're on top of it. We, you know, hauled this guy in because he went and cleared where he shouldn't have. And I think he wants to have a building lot there. I mean,
So that's what he told me.
well, he's told us, yeah. So it's like, you know, but we're doing what we can, and I don't really know what more the man wants from us. I
Okay.
mean, we can't take our I have personal feelings about building, period, in town, but that can't rule what I do here on the board. I have to do what's right.
Okay.
I think we could invite him, I'm sorry, I think we could invite him to join us. He seems to be informed. He wants to have a say. I think he should be here. I mean, I don't want to sound like the.
All right, well, maybe that's the,
But part of the
maybe,
letter should be, you're welcome to join us and share your expertise. We welcome it from anybody else who comes in here and introduces themselves.
okay.
Now, the Board of Health has a 100-foot setback from wetlands. I mean, DEP, it's 50 for Title V, so, and I'm wondering, the town has the 100-foot?
No, I don't think so.
So it's the same as the state?
50.
Still
50-foot no disturb, you know, but in a new site, if it's an existing site, well,
Right.
you know, then we've got to do what we
But
can.
is this these are new lots
These
that
were
are
new
gonna be going
lots,
in?
right.
Who knew?
Yeah, and the septics were at least 50 feet. They were all out of the,
Some towns have the additional bylaw that adds 50 feet for a septic distance to a wetland or a stream. And then, you know, that gives you an extra buffer.
right.
Because a lot of these are septic kind of issues, you know, where
Right,
it's perking and, you know, there's
right.
ledge and how do you, Title V.
And that's what I didn't serve on the Board of Health, but I know through my work that there's a whole lot of things that changed in Title V that actually made sites more viable than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Board of
Kinda
Health
needs to
goes
take up
too
down
and
there.
monitors the perk tests.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's not really our purview what he's complaining about.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got the letter,
Yeah.
and not that I'm trying to pass the buck, but maybe we'll take a look at it, Pat, and,
Yeah, I mean, if you want to do what Todd said too, we could say, you're welcome to come in and discuss it, and if
okay,
it involves Board of Health, we can certainly talk with them, or
sure.
He can go talk to them.
we could. But we're
No,
we're here
you
to
know
help
what,
them.
though, thing is, we have a lot on our plate all the time, and if he can go down there and discuss it with Jennifer. You know, we are doing our job. He didn't come to any meetings, and all the abutters were invited, especially on one. He would have been an abutter. He did not come in here. And it's been over with for quite a while, so,
Well, a lot of times people don't realize that the hearing takes place, and then they don't react until they actually see a building going up or something.
well, but I know his
If,
neighbors.
if he was the guy that's right to the right of that property, I talked to him when I was inspecting that site where they.
No, it wasn't, this
No,
is
it's
not
not,
the same
okay,
guy.
it's different
That's
person,
Gary.
okay, good.
He's around the corner, but I know he knew about it,
Okay,
so.
all right. We got anything else?
There will be an executive session for the next meeting.
Okay.
I talked to Carol briefly about it, but the lawyers are finally done with their
Clever.
lawyering, doing what they do, going back and forth on the Glades Road property, and then
Okay.
also on, the Fern properties on Clap Road.
Okay.
Seems as though they've ironed everything out.
Oh, good.
So would
It's
that be
amazing how many
before the
times it
meeting?
goes back and forth, and,
The lawyers have to make some money.
yeah, it's.
They're good at it.
I mean, they would change a couple words in there and then deliberate for a week or two. Sorry, they're nice people, whatever.
Is
Okay.
that gonna be before your regular meeting, or?
I think, yeah, I mean, I would talk to Pat about that because I want to get the email from the attorney with those documents in it to you and then to the appropriate members. Frank has to recuse himself from one of them.
214 Clap, because I'm in a butter.
Okay.
So we just don't email it. That's
Geez, I
and,
must have-
and technically Carol, honestly, because she's in the butter.
Carol does the email.
Well, that's
Well, you
kind of
can't
why I
look at
wanted
that,
to ask
Carol.
Pat for his email. Was
I don't know anything about it.
I know, no, I know. That's why. But if I gave you the email instead of to Pat and asked you to forward it to everybody, then you would have it. So that's why I was going to get Pat's new email when he gets it and have him do it.
He's got it.
I've
Yeah.
got it.
And you should be, I mean, I don't want any input, because we've been going on long enough.
Yeah.
But,
It was just to get it.
because if
smooth.
because you could see something and be like, whoa, we've been over it enough. I think it's good, I really do. I think it's good.
Anything was good.
Hmm?
And
No,
what
they
came
straightened out the
before.
Glades Road one
Yeah.
well, so anyway, but we'll
That's
put that
great.
so that you guys can look at what they wrote, and I can ask the attorney, maybe we don't have to have an executive, no, I think we have to, because I don't think we can just email it, and I don't think we're not allowed to do that way, just approve it that way, so,
Okay.
Yeah.
that's all I got.
Well, maybe, I don't know whether it's feasible for enough of you to come here before the regular scheduled meeting.
I can.
I could do
Is
that.
it on a Monday? Next 2
Next
weeks?
one's on a Monday.
Yeah.
Then another Wednesday.
Are you around, Penny, or you?
No, I'm gone, but Tony will be back. He's back Friday.
And Tony's
Tony
familiar
will be
with
back,
it.
How about Paul?
I don't know. I think he's flying tonight.
Yeah, Monday's a better,
For Paul?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't
So the
take
rest
long, it
should
really
be
shouldn't.
here.
All right,
Mondays are fine, it's just
I will just be gone.
occasional Wednesday throws me off.
okay.
Tell me about it.
Not the next meeting, but the one after.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the last thing, just, and we can actually might get out of here by 8:30.
That's cool, though.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're gonna be in transition for a little bit, sort of sorting out what folks do and don't do. But one of the pieces that came up was sort of thinking about the difference between filing an NOI and RDA, things like that, and what interpretation, different folks' interpretations are of that. And so we've been using RDAs to sort of handle simple projects, you know, like tonight, that addition, that was in the 100.
Based on distance.
Sort of,
Yeah.
and the complication of the project and things like that. And then if it seemed like it was something relatively minor, that
Right.
we would use the IDA as opposed to,
Right, the main reason I brought it up is, you know, to see how you've handled them in the past, but I've had a number of calls this past week from, you know, contractors saying, this is all I want to do, what does this require? And I had 3 or 4, and one was, you know, footings near a seawall, there's only 2 footings that need to go in. It's not gonna involve heavy equipment, it's just gonna be putting in sonotubes, that type of thing. And it's in a, you know, it's in the beach area, it's right along Hummerock. And to me, it would have been a minor project, it was a similar project in Hanover, but I don't know how you look at it near the.
You don't have seawalls in Hanover, do you?
Right, yeah, I mean, that type of project where it's 2 footings, yeah. But, you know, how would you look at that, in
well,
this
first
case,
off, the
it's-
first one thing they're gonna say is either Vinnie or Jim told me it was okay.
Yeah, right, yeah. I mean, it's a deck replacement, same footprint, and, you know, they're going through the building permit process, but 2 concrete sonotubes, and, so I don't know. I mean, what do you usually feel about that?
Anybody wanna weigh in?
Anything on the beach, I feel they have to come in. We've had too many.
No, but do you want them to be an RDA or a notice?
I think that more than likely could be an idea.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm saying they have to come in.
Oh, I
yeah,
thought
any
you were
kind of
just
work.
gonna give
No,
okay
no.
over the phone.
No, that's.
I wanna see
Right,
something.
yeah.
I
Something's
don't
gonna
know.
hold up a
It-
deck.
you know.
Yeah.
Right, no, not a, yeah.
In existing, the IDA probably would do, but a notice if it wasn't existing.
Right. The difference between inland and along the coast is it's actually in a resource area. Anything in a resource area inland, it's an automatic NOI, but, you know, coastal, you know, storm flowage area, stuff like that, it would seem like an NOI might be overkill for 2 sonotubes, so an IDA,
I
I mean,
think
I would agree.
That would be my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as they're gonna get their tails in here.
Right, you can't waive. There was another one, a person wanted to dig a French drain. He's not along the beach, he's inland a street or 2, but he's still in flood zone. French drain beside his foundation. He's at the low point in the street, and it's not, you know, it's not gonna cause anybody else any issue. It's just to get regular rainstorm water away from his foundation. But the big storm's gonna flood him anyway, so I don't know if you'd want to do an IDA or if that would just be a minor activity that wouldn't require a filing. Yeah, it's
If
gonna
it's
be-
just a friend, you know,
But
yeah, because they have to still come in. We can always, with an RDA, even though you suggested to them, and they come in and we say, that's a little more work than we thought, and then make them come back with a notice. That's what happens sometimes.
But I think most landscape projects, whether someone's
Yeah.
doing a driveway or something like that, we've handled it as a patio or some sort of minor piece, we've handled it with an RDA.
What about a, you know, tree falls down in the yard,
No, I
no
think,
permit at all? you
I think if a tree's down or something where it's a hazard that's gotta be taken care of, you know, we appreciate a call to the commission saying, you know, we've got this, it's in the
Yeah.
resource area, can it be taken care of? And that's the part that I'd like to be able to say to Pat, you know,
Do it.
you know,
Yeah,
we don't
yeah.
need to,
Just get pictures.
you know,
Yeah,
and.
take a picture and.
And in some cases, a couple of these show causes, like the fence there at Edward Foster, I think a little bit that was over the top. I mean, that lady came in with oodles of paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
This was someone got a horse and fenced in an area along the marsh, and we're having a show cause hearing because she dug 20 post holes in there, and I mean, she came in with so much paperwork, and I
But
just.
we had to do something, because somebody called, they said the horse is in the marsh.
But I think sometimes we could just talk with someone like that rather than
Yeah.
send them a show cause and get, you know, there's places like Otis Road, Indian Trail one, with, definitely it's a show cause and it might lead to further
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah.
But there's some that, I mean, people are just blind to the fact that they had to do
Right.
something. And if it's that minor in nature, putting in some fence poles or something, I just think it's really over the top
To drag her in.
personally.
I think that on that though, the neighbor who had called was the one, we had requested that he pay for an outside consultant to check the lines and all of that, which was the only reason I felt as though we should talk to this woman, really. That was just my take on it, was that.
But it was a much larger project.
I know, but if it doesn't stand for her, then why did he have to do it? That was the reason I felt like, well, we should at least call her in so that for.
The other thing I was gonna ask too is, do homeowners always need to hire a wetland consultant? Like for certain types of project, they have a yard that's established, it's up to the edge of a buffer or to a wetland, and they wanna put a porch on. You know, for some of those, I'm gonna be out there, and I might say, gee, you know, you're not going any further, we know where the wetland line is, you really don't have to bring someone in, it's pretty obvious where it is. It can be expensive to have someone go out there, not to take business away from, you know, wetland scientists, but I think there are cases where they may not be required.
Personally, I'm in favor of that. If you have the time and it's a simple project that you can take a look at and say, you know what, this is just
Right.
obviously out of that area.
Right.
It would certainly make it a lot easier. I mean, people pay their taxes
Right.
to have us here, or you here.
Yeah.
So if those kind of simple things can be done and not become burdensome, thank you. Then I personally don't have, just be careful of your time.
Right, and, you know, it'd be different if it's a subdivision or a big project, something like that, you always want to have an impartial person out there, but if someone's gonna put in a pool or a deck and it's a very obvious wetland line, it could save time and money for homeowners.
Yeah.
Each case is different.
Right.
That's
It is.
What's
I mean,
that?
I
We
Right.
don't usually do it anyway and get a consultant for.
No,
No.
you know, yeah.
But
Certainly on the new builds when we want the.
Right.
And they're
right.
clearing a
Really
lot.
establish it, exactly, yeah, that's different. Yeah, they would need to have it flagged, come before the commission and, you know. but-
Mr. Bjorklund, you,
Yeah, I just wanted to back you up for 1 second. When you were talking about the French drain that somebody had, you want to be cautious because we have a stormwater bylaw in town. I don't know if Hanover has the same thing.
No.
So and it's not in the conservation bylaw, but it is part of conservation's jurisdiction if somebody's within 100 feet of a wetland. So you probably want to read up on the stormwater bylaw, because if you're changing drainage patterns at all,
Right.
you may be subject to that permit. So a French drain has to drain to somewhere. So that's going to change some type of a drainage pattern. So just read up on that bylaw
Yeah,
before.
it sounds like too, it's size of
or you
lot
can consult Steve and he'll help you out with it.
No, that's
I
good.
got a copy of it in my
Yeah.
truck, if
Yeah.
you want to see it.
No, that's a good point, but it sounded like too, sometimes lot size, you're not subject to the stormwater bylaw. You know, if you're under 5,000 square feet or something like that, according to my conversation, it feels like.
But when you get into the drainage patterns, there's a different
Yeah.
section in the bylaw. So if you're going to change drainage patterns on a basin that's over like 15,000 square feet of contributing area, then that requires a permit. So it's a different category, but
Oh,
it's
thank
in
you.
there, in the general bylaws.
Have you got Steve's number on your speed dial?
I don't have to, he drops in every day.
Get used to that.
Good one.
That wasn't good.
Steven's
said it
always
right.
around.
Trying to help.
And you
Just-
are very helpful
Mhm.
sometimes, most of the time.
Are you buying tonight or what? Well, you're just trying to help out.
You broke?
Let's see, there was a lot up on Indian Trail where someone was doing a perk test and.
That's the one that I need to recluse myself from.
Oh, okay. And it was, they were given the okay to do the perk test. And it was gonna be outside of the 100. They hit a lot of ledge. They inched closer and closer, and it turns out, they ended up being within the 100. And they are gonna have to file an NOI for the project they're proposing, single-family house and septic. The person I spoke with wanted to know if she needed to file an RDA, an after-the-fact RDA, I guess, for the work that had already taken place to do the perk, or can she wait until, you know, she has to file an NOI and just do the one permit? It sounded like she's still more than 50 feet away. She wasn't in any resource area, but she was in the 100-foot buffer. And it was a perk for septic, and
Was there any clearing? Did she say if they cut down any trees or anything?
no, it sounded like there wasn't any clearing. It was just they assumed they were gonna perk a lot closer to the street than they did. And as they went a little further, there was.
I don't
don't know.
That's a tough one, because if the septic ends up being in the 50, because they kept having to, are they gonna have room outside of the 50 for the septic? They must, or else they wouldn't go forward.
Yeah, they'll be going to the
That's
Board of
obvious.
Health and they'll be filing a notice of intent, so I mean, there'd be a good chance to review whatever their plans are. But, I mean, I guess her question is, I'm gonna be filing anyway, do I need to file both different permits? So,
And someone signed off on her perk test?
yes.
From
Yeah.
conservation, either myself or Jim, I
Yeah.
would guess.
Yeah, it was Indian Trail, yeah.
I don't remember that.
I mean, there's a million of these little oddball ones, but I mean, if you want, on something like that, I could go out just to make sure. I mean, I'm just taking the word for it, there was no clearing, but I mean, I could go out and take a look.
It is kind of annoying when you go out to the site visit and see that they cut down
different.
a bunch of trees
It's-
already to do the perk tests.
Yeah, right.
It isn't funny, but it's pathetic
It is, but
funny.
it's annoying. It's
Yeah.
like, wait.
Yeah, it's not spelled out real well either, a lot of times in bylaws. It should be in black and white. Before you do your perk test, you know, let us know where you're doing it and if there's gonna be any tree cutting, because they go out and, I'm in Upland, what difference does it make? But it's, you know, it's still trees coming down, so they shouldn't be doing it.
Stephen?
In Scituate, the 100-foot buffer is a resource area, so it's different than most towns. The 100-foot buffer is a resource area in the local bylaw.
Yeah.
It's called, well, there's a buffer and then there's
What's a resource area?
something else called.
The buffer strip.
zone,
Strip,
buffer
strip,
strip.
buffer zone,
Strip.
strip, okay.
No, I think some of the stuff you're just gonna wind up taking on a case-by-case basis, and, you know, some of the members are more than willing to jump in on some of that to see where we get to with it. Personally, I think as you get more familiar with a lot of the areas, you're gonna know which ones are more sensitive and which ones aren't. You have to be careful with our plotting system for the wetlands. I mean, someone comes in, or you get an application for a building permit or something else, you pull up that lot, it shows a wetlands. In some cases, there's been no wetlands. Can remember getting a call from someone saying, I can't get going because they say there's wetlands here, and I walked the whole piece of property, crisscrossed it, and
It showed up on the GIS.
yeah,
yeah,
as
yeah.
a wetlands, and there were none. Other times, it'll show that it's a smaller wetland than is
Yeah.
really out there, or it's closer than it appears on that.
Mhm.
And, you know, so it's really hard to go out and look at every one. You're taking a look at that and signing off on a building permit. And once in a while, you find out that it's a little bit closer. You know, we had that issue of Steverman, say. But, so, I mean, those things can occur. We do our best to make sure that we're covering all those pieces, but it's hard to, you know, you could have 10 building applications, and you can look at them here on the screen, or you can try to get out to each one, and even if you did walk some of them, you wouldn't know unless you really covered some ground.
Yeah.
So.
It's a learning curve, big one.
But I think, in a lot of these smaller projects, at least, you know, when they're really insignificant, a tree's down, or fences blown over, or someone's doing something fairly simple, it seems to me that it's almost better that the agent can make those
Yeah.
simple calls than to bog down a meeting and a bunch of people's time with something that, and drag someone in the evening, just doesn't make sense to me. And what it's gonna wind up doing is having people not file at all, as opposed to being able to
Right.
come into the office and say, hey, I got this, what do I do? And you can give them a little bit of advice or guidance, and they're on their way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have a hearing tomorrow night on trees? Is there some
Yeah.
trees?
Well, a neighbor sent that email out. A neighbor, one of the people, 67 Gannett Road, was she? Anyways, I guess there's a meeting here with Mike Breen, George Stone. The National Grid has, was it 23 or 32 trees in town they want to cut down? And some of the neighbors, of course, don't want their big trees cut down in their front yard, so they're gonna, I don't really think any of these are in our jurisdiction, the trees, but the neighbor sent it to us, that email, that we should be
And what time is
there.
it?
I don't know, was it 7,
7:30
I
or-
can't even remember.
7:30
And
sticks with
I
me.
think Mike Green
All
and
right.
that, I mean, they're gonna work with the people, but if the trees have to come down, I mean, it's better than losing your power for a week.
Okay.
I don't think National Grid is out there. just
So this is more of
willy-nilly.
a scenic ways hearing or something?
I think it's the
Yeah.
quantity of trees that they wanna cut down triggers a,
No, well, this lady was complaining that it would devalue her house in that email. If they cut these 2 trees down in front of her house, and she was going on and on. And
Is he the tree warden for the town, Mike?
Yes.
Mike,
No.
well,
George Story is, George used to be head of DPW, or,
if you look at the
Brown's
pictures that were in that email, they're all like right on the road. I
Yeah.
mean, I saw 1 or 2 of them that seemed like they were close
see,
to
they're
people's
actually on
yards.
town property.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're in there, they're in
Yeah.
that
They're
little
not
strip.
in that strip.
Where did you see that, Todd?
In that email that came
Yeah,
from, there's
she said
another.
there was pictures in there.
okay.
The email that, well, you did get it. You got it yesterday or this morning.
Comes to my phone, I don't have it.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
But, I thought I might drop by, but it depends upon if it's still cold out. I might not.
Okay.
Go out
I
again.
mean, there's a lot of trees. I mean, to go around and check and see if any of them are in 50 feet of a wetland is,
Okay.
I don't know if it's worth the time, honestly.
Tomorrow's the, well,
All right.
I don't
Well, I
think
just, I
they're
wasn't sure
willy-nilly
I wasn't
cutting
sure where it
trees
came
down.
from.
Yeah, it came from the neighbors that don't want it down because Bill Good and I forget what her name was.
Okay.
Yes,
The biggest issue for you guys on that might be whether they're gonna pull the stumps out or if they're gonna grind the stumps. Because if they're near the edge of the road and they're gonna rip the stumps out of there, they could create some damage. If they're just gonna grind them and cover over them.
well, I think it would be more than,
Maybe I might check with Mike tomorrow.
yeah.
I'll check with Mike.
I think, once again, it's
Tomorrow, too.
unfortunate, but you can't keep these trees, they're on town property, and if they really need to go, they need to go.
Okay.
It's not as though they're going on private property.
Okay. What else? Shoot,
8:30.
passed it.
Yeah,
Anything else?
I don't think so.
A motion?
Make a motion to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think it was to adjourn.